I was holding the test, 2 pink lines. After 3 years, it had finally happened. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. The little plastic stick trembled in my hand as if it, too, was alive, trembling with the same disbelief that coursed through my body. I sank onto the cold edge of the bathtub, feeling the chill of the porcelain against my skin, and let the tears come. They weren't loud tears. Just quiet ones, the kind that slip down your cheeks before you even realize you're crying. My lips curved into a trembling smile. "We did it," I whispered to the silent room. "We finally did it." I pressed my hand against my stomach, flat and soft beneath my palm, and felt something sacred stir inside me. It was too soon to feel movement, of course, only a few weeks, but my heart swore it could sense a heartbeat somewhere beneath the skin. I thought about Daniel. I could already picture his reaction, the way his eyebrows would lift in shock, then soften into joy. He'd pull me close, spin me around the kitchen, his laughter echoing through the house like it used to when we first got married. The thought made me giggle through my tears. I wanted the moment to be perfect. Not rushed, not messy. Just ours. Today was Margaret's 60th birthday, and I'd been planning the celebration for weeks. The house already smelled of roasted chicken, vanilla cake, and fresh lilies. The dining table was covered with white linen, the silverware polished until it gleamed. I had even folded the napkins into tiny swans. Margaret loved details like that. The sun was spilling golden light across the hardwood floors, painting the living room in warm tones that made everything look soft and romantic. I wanted tonight to feel like home, not just for Margaret, but for me too. In the small drawer of my bedside table was a white box tied with a blue ribbon. Inside it, tucked beneath a pacifier, was a note written in my careful handwriting. "You're going to be a dad." That's how I would tell him, after the guests had gone. When the candles were still flickering low and the house smelled faintly of wine and laughter. It would just be the two of us. No noise, no distraction. Just love. I stood up, washed my face, and looked into the mirror. My reflection looked back, the same me, but lighter somehow. My eyes shimmered. For the first time in years, I saw a future in them. "Okay," I whispered to the mirror. "Let's make tonight perfect." By mid-afternoon, the house was buzzing with preparation. The florist delivered fresh peonies. The caterer brought in trays of food. I hummed softly as I arranged the flowers in Margaret's favorite vase, the one with the tiny crack down the side that she refused to throw away. When the doorbell rang, I wiped my hands and rushed to answer it. Margaret stood there, wrapped in a soft lavender coat, her silver hair perfectly styled. She smelled faintly of roses and mint, like she always did. "Lily, my dear," she said warmly, her voice filled with that commanding affection she carried everywhere. "This looks wonderful." I hugged her tightly. "Happy birthday, Mom." Behind her, Daniel appeared, tall, broad-shouldered, carrying his phone and smiling in that effortless way that once made me fall in love with him. He kissed my cheek lightly. "You've outdone yourself again," he murmured, his voice sent a small, familiar warmth through me. I wanted to tell him right then, to blurt it out, "We're going to be parents." But I stopped myself. Not yet. It had to be special. He glanced at his phone as it buzzed in his hand. A brief frown crossed his face, gone almost instantly when he looked up and saw me watching. "Work," he said casually, sliding the phone into his pocket. "Nothing important." I nodded, brushing it off. Daniel worked too much, that was all. He always had. The first guests began arriving around 6. Laughter, perfume, the clink of glasses, the house transformed into something alive and glittering. I moved among them like a hostess in a dream, greeting friends, pouring drinks, smiling until my cheeks ached. Every few minutes, Daniel's hand found mine, a fleeting touch that grounded me. We looked like the perfect couple, and maybe we were, for now. When Margaret stood to make her toast, everyone quieted. The chandelier light danced across the glasses as she raised hers high. "To family," she said, her eyes bright. "And to Lily, who makes this house feel like love itself." The room erupted in applause. I felt my face flush as Daniel squeezed my hand beneath the table. His smile was soft, proud. For that moment, I believed everything was exactly as it should be. After dinner, I went to check on the cake. In the quiet of the kitchen, the laughter from the living room sounded distant, muffled, like a memory I was already losing. I leaned against the counter, staring at the flickering candles through the doorway. I thought about the life growing inside me, about the secret that pulsed like a second heartbeat. I imagined our future, late-night lullabies, tiny socks folded in drawers. Daniel painting a nursery wall a soft shade of blue. The world felt still, balanced on the edge of something new. When I walked back into the living room, Daniel was laughing with one of his coworkers. His phone buzzed again, and he excused himself politely, stepping away toward the hallway. I didn't think much of it. Not then. I smiled, picked up a plate, and sliced the cake, vanilla cream with golden frosting. The knife glided through it easily, smooth and clean, leaving perfect pieces behind. Everyone cheered as Margaret blew out her candles. "Make a wish." I called out, clapping with the others. She smiled at me, eyes twinkling. I already have, dear. For a fleeting second. Everything shimmered, the lights, the laughter. The promise of tomorrow. I looked at Daniel across the room. My husband, the man I'd built my life around. And whispered to myself, you're going to be a dad. And for that single, fragile moment, I believed it was the happiest night of my life. People used to tell me that Daniel and I looked like the kind of couple who had it all figured out. Perfect jobs. Perfect smiles. Perfect little house with the white fence and blooming hydrangeas out front. I believed them for a long time. Daniel was an architect, one of those quiet, precise minds that saw beauty in symmetry and order. He loved clean lines, old jazz records, and Sunday morning coffee on the porch. When he laughed, really laughed, it came from deep in his chest. That sound was home to me once. We met in college. He was the calm to my chaos, the logic to my dreams. I used to think love was fireworks, but with him, it was gravity, steady, constant, grounding. I never questioned it. After we got married, we moved to Portland, Oregon. Our house wasn't big, but it was ours, a 2-story craftsman on a quiet street with a maple tree in the front yard. Every fall, the leaves turned crimson, covering the driveway like spilled wine. I used to rake them while Daniel washed the car, and he'd always stop to flick a leaf into my hair, pretending it made me look artistic. For 3 years, I poured everything into making our life beautiful. I decorated every corner, planted herbs in the kitchen window, learned to cook the dishes he loved most. We tried for a baby almost from the start. When the tests kept coming back negative, I told myself it just wasn't our time yet. Margaret, my mother-in-law, was a force of nature, elegant, intimidating, and endlessly loyal to her son. But she'd always been kind to me. She'd call every Sunday morning to ask how I was, sometimes sending over old recipes written in her careful cursive. Family is work, Lily, she once told me. But the right kind of work, the kind that makes you stronger. I held on to that sentence more than she knew. And then there was Sophie Bennett, my best friend since high school. The kind of woman who wore her heart on her sleeve and always carried a spare lipstick in her bag. Sophie knew everything about me, my fears, my hopes, the secret lists I kept of baby names I loved. You and Daniel are like a movie couple, she said once, teasing me over brunch. You even argue politely. I laughed then. But sometimes, when Daniel's silences stretched too long, or when he stayed late at work without texting, I'd hear her words again, like a movie couple, and wonder what kind of movie we were in the evenings. I liked to sit by the window with a cup of chamomile tea, watching the streetlights flicker on. Daniel would be beside me on the couch, laptop open, eyes fixed on blueprints. We didn't talk much during those hours, but I told myself it was enough, the quiet kind of love people wrote poetry about. Still, there were moments. Small, almost invisible cracks, the nights when he'd come home smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. The weekends he'd work late and come back with that distant look in his eyes. When I asked if everything was okay, he'd smile, kiss my forehead, and say, "You worry too much, Lily." And I always believed him. Because that's what love is supposed to be, trust without question. When I told Margaret about the baby, I planned to do it gently, after Daniel knew. She adored the idea of becoming a grandmother. She'd always fussed over friends' babies, buying gifts just in case. She once told me she couldn't wait to see Daniel holding his own child. I smiled at the memory as I arranged the last of the dishes on the dining table that night. The scent of rosemary and lemon filled the room. Candlelight reflected off the glasses, softening everything into gold. Daniel came up behind me, slipping his arms around my waist. "You really went all out," he said against my neck. "It's her 60th, I replied, leaning into him. "She deserves it." He turned me around, his eyes studying me for a second. "You look happy." "I am," I said simply. It was true. Beneath my ribs, something new pulsed, not just the life I carried, but a fragile, glowing sense of hope. Margaret arrived just before the guests, wearing her favorite pearl earrings and a bright red dress that made her look younger than 60. She swept me into a hug, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "You're glowing, sweetheart. Daniel must be treating you right." I laughed softly. He always does. As the evening went on, the house filled with warmth. Music, laughter, the sound of wine being poured. Daniel moved easily through the crowd, charming as always. Every few minutes, he'd glance at me and smile, that practiced, effortless smile that made people think we were perfect, but I noticed how often he checked his phone. The way his thumb hovered over the screen like he was waiting for something. When I asked if everything was okay, he said it was just a client. I nodded, pretending to believe it. Sophie arrived late, carrying a small gift wrapped in silver paper. She hugged me, then leaned in close. "You look radiant, babe. What's your secret?" I smiled. "Just happy, I guess." If she noticed the tremor in my voice, she didn't mention it. When the clock struck 9, the candles burned low, their wax pooling like melted gold. Margaret stood again to give a short speech, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm so proud of my family," she said. "And especially of Lily, the daughter I never had." The guests cheered. My chest ached in the sweetest way. I looked around the table, at the people I loved. At the man I thought I knew better than anyone, and felt the future open before me like a storybook. I in that moment, surrounded by light and laughter. I couldn't have imagined that the next chapter would begin with the sound of his voice, and another woman's name. The laughter around the table had begun to fade into a comfortable hum when Margaret asked, "Where's Daniel, dear? I haven't seen him in a while." I looked around, expecting to see him refilling glasses or chatting with one of his colleagues. But his chair was empty. His wine glass half full. "He probably stepped outside to take a call," I said quickly, forcing a smile. Margaret nodded and returned to her conversation, but something inside me tightened. I don't know why. Maybe it was the way he had been glancing at his phone all night. Or maybe it was instinct, that quiet voice inside every woman that senses when something is wrong. I excused myself, smoothing my dress as I walked through the hallway. The sound of chatter and clinking dishes faded behind me, replaced by the soft rustle of curtains and the hum of the refrigerator. The house felt suddenly too big, too quiet. I passed the kitchen, the empty living room, and stopped near the back door. Through the glass, I saw Daniel standing in the garden, his phone pressed to his ear. The porch light carved a warm circle around him, highlighting the curve of his jaw, the slight smile on his face. For a moment, I almost stepped outside. But something in the way he was smiling, tender, secretive, froze me in place. Then I heard her name. "Vanessa," he said softly. Almost a whisper. My breath caught in my throat. He turned slightly, his face half in shadow. "I promise, it won't be much longer," he murmured. "She believes everything I say. Like clockwork." I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. The blood rushed in my ears, drowning out everything else. He laughed quietly, a sound I used to love. "She still thinks we're trying for a baby. Can you believe that?" I felt my knees weaken. My hand went to my stomach, the secret still so fragile inside me. The words echoed in my mind like broken glass. He continued talking, his tone light, intimate. "I just need to get through tonight. After that, it's done. You and me, Vanessa. I promise." My throat burned. I wanted to burst through the door, to scream at him, to make him see what he was destroying. But I couldn't move. My body refused to obey. So I just stood there, invisible, listening to the man I loved tell another woman he was leaving me. When he finally hung up, he slipped his phone into his pocket and stood still for a moment, looking up at the dark sky as if nothing had happened. Then he ran a hand through his hair, sighed, and walked back toward the house. I turned and rushed into the kitchen, pretending to adjust the candles, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. When he stepped inside, I pasted on a smile. "There you are," I said, my voice too bright. "Your mother was asking for you." He smiled easily, wrapping an arm around my waist. "Sorry, work call. You know how it is." I nodded, forcing myself to breathe. His hand on my back felt foreign, almost cruel in its familiarity. We returned to the dining room together. The guests were laughing again, passing around dessert. Margaret was telling a story about Daniel as a little boy, and everyone was leaning in, smiling. I sat beside him, my lips curved in a practiced smile, my eyes fixed on the flickering candles. The conversation blurred around me. Words floated by: promotion, vacation, family trip, meaningless sounds that barely reached me. My mind was still in the garden, replaying his voice, every word slicing deeper. When someone asked me a question, I nodded automatically. I laughed when others did. I poured wine, refilled plates, moved through the motions of being Lily Parker, the perfect wife, the gracious hostess. Inside, I was crumbling. Once I caught my reflection in the mirror behind the bar cabinet. My face looked pale, almost translucent under the warm lights. I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Daniel leaned in close, his breath brushing my ear. "You okay? You seem a little off tonight." I wanted to laugh, or maybe to scream. Instead, I said, "Just tired. It's been a long day." He kissed my temple and turned back to the conversation, unaware of the storm unraveling inside me. When the guests began leaving, I hugged them all, smiling, thanking them for coming. My hands were steady, my voice calm. Only my eyes betrayed me, they burned, heavy with tears that refused to fall. Margaret kissed my cheek before leaving. "You and Daniel are such a blessing," she whispered. "Don't ever forget that." I nodded, afraid that if I spoke, my voice would break. When the door finally closed and silence settled over the house, I stood in the middle of the living room surrounded by empty glasses and half-burned candles. The scent of wine and vanilla still hung in the air, sickly sweet. Daniel was upstairs, humming to himself as he changed out of his suit. The sound drifted down the stairs, casual, carefree, as if nothing had changed. I pressed a hand to my stomach again. 2 pink lines. A heartbeat waiting to be born. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and began clearing the table. One plate at a time. One glass after another. If he could pretend, so could I. That night, the house was too quiet. Even the walls seemed to be holding their breath. Daniel was beside me in bed, scrolling through his phone, the soft light from the screen flashing across his face. I turned away, pretending to sleep, but every nerve in my body was awake, sharp and restless. When he finally turned off the light, the darkness felt heavy between us. His hand brushed against my shoulder, but I didn't move. For the first time in years, I felt like a stranger lying next to a man I used to know by heart. I stared at the ceiling until the first hint of dawn crept through the blinds. The pink light spread across the room, soft and cruel, reminding me of the 2 pink lines that had started this day. When Daniel's alarm buzzed, he kissed my forehead before heading out for his morning run. "You okay?" he asked casually. "I'm fine," I said, my voice calm. Too calm. As soon as the door closed, I sat up, my chest tight. The air smelled faintly of his cologne, cedar and citrus, a scent that once meant safety but now felt like a lie. I told myself I just needed proof. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe it wasn't what it sounded like. My hands were shaking when I reached for his phone on the nightstand. The screen lit up instantly. He never changed his passcode. The familiarity of it broke me a little. I opened his messages. The first thing I saw was a photo, Daniel and a blonde woman, Vanessa, standing close together in front of a jewelry store. Her head was tilted toward him, her smile easy and confident. His hand rested on her back. Beneath it, her text glowed like fire. "Can't wait to wear this one, D." My vision blurred. I scrolled through more, messages full of hearts, inside jokes, late-night confessions. "She's asleep. I wish you were here. Soon, baby. Just a few more weeks. We'll start fresh. No lies." Each line sliced deeper, until the words stopped making sense. I locked the phone and pressed it against my chest, trying to breathe. The truth sat in my throat like poison. For a moment, I thought about smashing the phone against the floor, screaming, waking the whole neighborhood. But instead, I placed it gently back on the nightstand. Because that's what I'd become, gentle even in my own heartbreak. The rest of the morning passed in fragments. I showered. Made coffee I didn't drink. Watched the clock tick past 8, then 9. When I finally picked up the phone, my fingers dialed Sophie's number almost on their own. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, you sound weird. What's going on? Can you come over?" My voice cracked. "On my way." 20 minutes later, she was sitting across from me at the kitchen table, her hand covering mine. I told her everything, the call I overheard, the messages, the photo. Every word felt like I was pulling glass from my throat. When I finished, Sophie was silent. Her eyes were wide, her lips pressed tight. Then she whispered, "I think I've seen her." I looked up, startled. "What do you mean?" She hesitated. "A few weeks ago, I was downtown picking up a gift. I saw Daniel outside the jewelry store near Pine Street. He wasn't alone. There was this blonde woman with him. They looked close. I told myself it couldn't be what it looked like. I didn't want to hurt you." Her voice broke at the end. I stared at her, the room spinning slowly around me. "So it was her," I whispered. "Vanessa." Sophie squeezed my hand. "Lily, listen to me. You don't deserve this. You need to think about what comes next." What came next? The words echoed inside me. I walked to the window. Outside, the world looked exactly the same, cars passing, leaves trembling in the breeze, a dog barking somewhere down the street. But everything had changed. Sophie followed me, her voice soft. "You can't keep pretending, honey. You have to decide if you're going to stay or walk away." "I'm pregnant," I said suddenly. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Her eyes widened. "Oh, Lily. I found out this morning," I whispered. "It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life." She pulled me into her arms. I let her hold me while the tears came, slow, unstoppable. I could feel her heartbeat against mine, strong and steady, grounding me when my own felt shattered. When I finally pulled away, I felt empty, but clearer somehow. The truth had weight, but it also had shape. "I need to know who I'm dealing with," I said quietly. Sophie frowned. "What do you mean?" "I'm done being blind. I'm going to find out everything, how long it's been, what he's told her. And then, when I'm ready, I'll decide what to do." Her expression hardened into something fierce. "Then I'll help you." We sat together for hours, talking about lawyers, about safety, about what life would look like after. It didn't feel real yet. But the seed of resolve had been planted. That evening, Daniel came home early. He kissed me like nothing had changed, asked if I wanted to order dinner. I smiled, said yes, and sat across from him as he talked about work, pretending to listen. The sound of his voice made my skin crawl, but I smiled anyway. I was already learning how to wear my mask. After he went to bed, I stood by the window and watched the moon rise over the quiet street. I thought about Sophie's words, about the tiny heartbeat growing inside me, and about the man asleep down the hall. the one who didn't know that his lies had already begun to crumble. For the first time, I wasn't just hurt. I was waiting. And beneath the ache, something new began to stir, not forgiveness, not even anger, but strength. 3 days later, I set the table for two. The air was heavy with the scent of rosemary and garlic. The same meal I had cooked on our first anniversary, Daniel's favorite, lemon pasta with grilled salmon and a bottle of red wine breathing on the counter. Every detail was deliberate. The candles. The music. The soft light from the chandelier that cast warm circles across the tablecloth. From the outside, it looked like any other night in our marriage. But inside, I was calm in a way that terrified me. This wasn't love anymore. It was closure dressed up as dinner. When Daniel came home, he seemed surprised. "Wow," he said, loosening his tie. "What's the occasion?" I smiled faintly. "Just felt like cooking. You've been working so hard lately." He kissed my cheek, the gesture automatic. "You're amazing," he murmured, walking into the dining room. "This looks incredible." I followed him, watching as he poured himself a glass of wine. He raised it slightly. "To my beautiful wife." The words tasted bitter in my mouth. I lifted my glass, but didn't drink. We ate quietly at first. He talked about his day, about meetings and clients, the usual small talk that used to fill our evenings. I nodded in the right places, smiled when I needed to. But my mind was somewhere else, on the messages, the pictures, the ring he'd promised another woman. After a while, I said softly, "Do you love your job, Daniel?" He looked up, puzzled. "Sure. Why?" "You're good at designing things," I said, tracing the rim of my glass. "You make people believe in what you build." He laughed. "I guess that's part of it." "You're also good at pretending," I said. The fork slipped from his hand, clattering against the plate. "What?" I met his eyes. "I know about her." For a heartbeat, the room went silent. Then he blinked, his face tightening. "Lily, what are you talking about?" "Vanessa," I said evenly. "The calls. The messages. The ring." His mouth opened, closed. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "You went through my phone." I almost laughed. "That's what you're upset about?" He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the flicker of guilt before he masked it with that smooth, practiced calm I'd seen so many times. "Lily, it's complicated." "No," I said quietly. "It's simple." He rubbed his temples. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't expect this to happen. Vanessa and it started as friendship. You were always so busy. So wrapped up in," he gestured vaguely, "like my love and loyalty were inconveniences." "In what?" I asked. He sighed. "You stopped being fun, Lily. Everything was about schedules, and doctors, and trying. It was suffocating. Vanessa makes me feel alive again." The words hit like a slap, but I didn't flinch. I took a slow breath, steadying my voice. "So that's your excuse? You betray me because I wanted a family?" His jaw tightened. "We weren't happy." "We?" I echoed. "Or you?" He didn't answer. I stood, walked to the cabinet, and pulled out the small white box, the one with the blue ribbon. I placed it gently on the table between us. He stared at it, confused. "What's that?" "Open it." He hesitated, then untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside, the pacifier sat beside the folded note. His hands shook as he unfolded it and read the words, "You're going to be a dad." The color drained from his face. You're pregnant?" I nodded once. For a moment, he looked like he might cry. He pushed his chair back, stood up, walked toward me with wide, desperate eyes. "Lily, this changes everything. We can fix this. We can start over. For the baby." I stepped back. "No, Daniel. It changes nothing." He froze, confusion flickering into anger. "You're not thinking clearly. You can't just." "I can," I interrupted, my voice calm, sharp. "I will keep this baby. But I will not stay married to a man who lies to me." His breath came fast. "You can't do this to us." I laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "You already did." The silence that followed was so thick it hurt to breathe. He looked at me for a long time, his expression shifting between disbelief and regret. Finally, he said quietly, "You'll regret this." I shook my head. "No. You will." He turned away, grabbing his coat from the chair. "I'll come back when you calm down." But I didn't stop him. I watched as he walked out the door, slamming it behind him. The echo reverberated through the house, rattling the glasses on the table, scattering candlelight across the walls. For a moment, I just stood there. The smell of burnt wax and red wine filled the air. The food on the plates had gone cold. I sat down slowly, staring at the empty chair across from me. The box still lay open, the note beside the untouched wine glass. My hands trembled, but not from weakness. The calm that settled over me was different. It wasn't numbness. It was strength. I gathered the dishes, blew out the candles one by one, and whispered into the darkness, "Goodbye, Daniel." Then I turned off the lights and let the silence close around me like a blanket. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid of it. The next morning, the house felt hollow. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, touching the empty side of the bed where Daniel used to sleep. His pillow still carried the faint scent of his cologne, something I once found comforting. Now only a ghost. I sat there for a long time. My hands resting on my stomach, feeling the quiet hum of life inside me. There was no anger left, just a strange calm. The kind that comes when you finally stop fighting for something that's already gone. By mid-morning, I called Sophie. "He's gone," I said simply. She didn't ask for details. "Good," she whispered. "You deserve better." We met later that day at a cafe downtown. I told her I was going to see a lawyer. She nodded approvingly, her eyes fierce with protectiveness. "You're stronger than you think, Lily. Don't let him make you doubt that." At the law office, the air smelled of coffee and paper. The attorney, a woman named Ellen, listened quietly as I told her everything: the affair, the messages, the baby. She took notes, then looked up at me and said, "You're making the right decision. This isn't the end. It's a new start." New start. The words lingered with me as I walked out into the crisp Portland air. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. When I got home, the house was silent, but not empty. I opened the windows, letting the autumn breeze sweep through every room, carrying out the stale air of secrets and lies. Margaret called that evening. I almost didn't answer. But something told me I owed her honesty. "Lily, dear," she began, her voice warm but cautious. "Daniel came by this morning. He looked lost. Is everything all right?" "No," I said quietly. "But it will be." There was a pause. Then she sighed softly. "I raised my son to be a man, but somewhere along the way, he forgot what that meant. You don't owe him forgiveness. You owe yourself peace." Her words broke something open in me. "Thank you, Margaret. Take care of yourself, and that little one," she said before hanging up. That night, I started cleaning. Not just the mess from dinner, but everything. I filled boxes with things that no longer belonged to my life: framed wedding photos, anniversary cards, old concert tickets. Each item held a memory that had once defined me. Now, they were just paper and glass. I labeled one box "Old Life." By the time I finished, the living room looked bare, but somehow lighter. I sat on the floor with my journal and began to write. Week 7. The nausea is worse, but I'm grateful for it. It means you're real. It means we're moving forward. I wrote until my hand ached, until the pain in my chest turned into something softer. Acceptance. A few days later, Daniel called. I didn't answer. Then came the texts. "Can we talk? I miss you. I made a mistake." I stared at the messages, my thumb hovering over the screen. Finally, I typed one sentence and hit send. "You don't miss me. You miss the person who believed your lies." He didn't reply. Sophie came by that weekend with takeout and flowers. "You should eat," she said, setting the containers on the counter. "And you should sleep." "I will," I promised. We sat together on the couch, sharing noodles and silence. I realized how much had changed. The world hadn't stopped, even though mine had shattered. Somehow, that felt comforting. Weeks passed. I returned to work at the small publishing company where I edited manuscripts. My boss, a kind older man named Richard, called me into his office one morning. "I heard about what happened," he said gently. "Take the time you need. But when you're ready, I think you should write. You have a voice people should hear." That night, I opened a new document on my laptop. The cursor blinked on the blank page like a heartbeat. I didn't know where to start, so I began with the truth. Sometimes, the person you love becomes a stranger. But losing them doesn't mean losing yourself. The words poured out, raw, unpolished, but real. Every morning after that, I wrote. About betrayal. About grief. About the small miracles of survival. Writing became my therapy, my quiet rebellion against silence. By the third week, I felt stronger. My body changed daily, reminding me that something beautiful was growing out of the wreckage. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a broken woman anymore. I saw someone becoming whole. One evening, I walked down to the park near our house. The trees were turning red and gold, the air crisp with the scent of rain. I sat on a bench, resting my hand on my belly, whispering softly, "We're going to be okay, little one. I promise." The world around me felt peaceful. For the first time in a long while, I believed it. When I returned home, the voicemail light on the phone was blinking. Daniel's voice filled the room, hesitant, broken. "Lily, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I don't expect forgiveness. I hope you're happy." I deleted the message. Not out of anger, but because I no longer needed to hear his voice to feel closure. Before bed, I lit a candle on the windowsill and opened my journal again. "The pain doesn't vanish overnight," I wrote. "But one day, you wake up and realize the silence isn't empty anymore. It's peaceful." Then I blew out the candle, climbed into bed, and let the quiet wrap around me, not as something lost, but as something new. The day Ella was born, it rained. Not a storm, just a soft, endless drizzle that wrapped the hospital windows in silver. I remember the sound, gentle, steady, like the world was whispering that we were safe. When the nurse placed her in my arms, everything went silent. Her tiny fingers curled around mine, her eyes blinking open for the first time, blue like the early morning sky. She was so small it frightened me, yet when she breathed, I felt the entire world shift inside my chest. "Hello, my love," I whispered. "Welcome home." I named her Ella Hope Parker. Ella, meaning light. Hope, because she was the proof that even in the darkest moments, something pure could bloom. The weeks that followed blurred together, sleepless nights. The scent of baby powder, soft lullabies hummed against her hair. There were moments when the house felt too quiet, when loneliness crept in like fog. But then Ella would smile, just a small, sleepy curve of her lips, and the silence would turn golden again. Daniel called once. Then twice. He left messages I never listened to, texts I never opened. I wasn't angry anymore. I just didn't need his voice echoing through the life I was rebuilding. One afternoon, a letter arrived in handwriting I knew by heart. He wrote that he was sorry, that he hoped to meet his daughter one day. That he had left Vanessa, that he was changing. I read it once. Then folded it neatly and placed it in a box, the same box where I kept my wedding ring, tucked away in the back of the closet. Not out of hate, but out of peace. Some stories didn't need to be reopened. As the months passed, Ella grew stronger. Her laughter filled the rooms that used to echo with silence. We moved into a smaller house near the coast, a place where the air smelled like salt and wildflowers. Every morning, I opened the windows and let the ocean breeze carry away the ghosts of the past. I started writing again, truly writing. What began as a private journal became a manuscript. A book about women who lost everything and found themselves anyway. I wrote late at night, after Ella fell asleep. My fingers flying across the keyboard while the sea whispered outside. When the book was published, it was called Chosen. People wrote to me from all over, women, mothers, strangers, telling me they saw themselves in my words. That they too had stayed. That they too had chosen to begin again. One afternoon, I was invited to speak at a local bookstore. I stood in front of a small crowd, my hands trembling slightly, and told them about strength, not the loud kind that roars, but the quiet kind that keeps you standing when everything else has fallen apart. Afterward, a woman came up to me, tears in her eyes. "Your story saved me," she said. I smiled. "No," I told her gently. "You saved yourself. I just reminded you that you could." That night, I came home to find Ella asleep on the couch, her small body curled up under a blanket, her favorite stuffed bunny pressed to her chest. The golden light from the lamp painted her face in soft hues, and for a long time, I just watched her breathe. I sat beside her and brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "You're my miracle," I whispered. "You're everything I never knew I needed." Outside, the ocean murmured against the shore, steady and endless. I thought about all the nights I had spent wishing for a different life, a different ending, and how, somehow, this one had turned out better than I could have imagined. Sometimes, healing doesn't look like victory. It looks like survival. Like waking up each morning, making breakfast, holding your child, and realizing you made it through months turned into years. Ella learned to walk, then to talk. Her laughter became the soundtrack of our home. Every time she called Mommy, it stitched another piece of me back together. On her 3rd birthday, we went to the beach. The sky was painted in pink and gold, and she ran toward the waves, her tiny footprints vanishing in the sand behind her. I stood watching, the wind tugging at my hair, my heart full. She turned, grinning, and shouted, "Come on, Mommy." I laughed and ran after her, my feet sinking into the cool sand. The ocean roared around us, wild and alive. When I caught her, I lifted her high into the air, spinning her until we both dissolved into laughter. As the sun began to set, I held her close, her head resting on my shoulder, her breath warm against my skin. The horizon burned orange and rose, the same colors that had once filled my dreams. I looked at her and whispered, "Your father left, but I stayed. You were never abandoned. You were chosen, every single day, by me." She didn't understand the words yet. But one day she would know that love isn't about who stays beside you, it's about who chooses you. Even when everything falls apart, and in that golden light, with the waves crashing behind us and her laughter still in my ears, I realized that I had finally found peace, not the kind I used to chase, but the kind that comes when you stop searching and start living.